This is the Voices of Titanic podcast, episode 4, and I'm your host, Sam. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to be doing things a little differently this week because there is so little information on this individual, especially compared to the other episodes. It will be a shorter story, and I'm going to record 2 different episodes and release them both on Saturday. Depending on how this goes, it might be something that I'll continue to do in the future if there is limited history and documentation for a specific passenger. This week, I am really wanting to share the stories of the last 2 people, the last 2 bodies that were recovered from the Titanic disaster. And I want to preface this by saying that all of these stories are awful and sad in many ways. I don't want to say that any one story is worse than another. There are some, however, that really hit you in such a way, and this is one of those times. I don't even remember what specifically brought me to it, but I was reading an article about the Titanic bodies that were being discovered weeks, even months after the disaster, and I came across this first gentleman, one of the last recovered bodies of the wreck. I think it was the way he was found that really gave me this heart-wrenching feeling. It just felt really terrible. His body all alone out in the Atlantic for so long. And I wanted to share his story because lots of the articles that I came across seem to focus primarily on his discovery and the state of his remains. But he, like the hundreds of others who perished, were so much more than their death. They had a life, a family, a job, friends. It's important to remember the way they lived and not just how they died. The young man I am referring to is William Thomas Kerley, known by those close to him as Tom. He was born in Sutton Waldron, Dorset, England, sometime in early 1884 to Charles Kerley, who was a farm worker, and his wife Emma. Dorset is really beautiful, especially the coastline. It is 2 hours from London and is known for Maiden Castle. It's considered the largest Iron Age hill fort in Europe and covers an area of 47 acres. There's the Jurassic coastline. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site where you can hunt for fossils. And it has quaint features like sandy beaches, apple cakes, and cream teas. There is an abundance there of monuments, not just from the Iron Age, but from the Neolithic period and the Bronze Age as well. Agriculture is really big in Dorset, and William Thomas Kerley came from a family of agriculture. Large farms in Dorset focus mainly on dairy and the cultivation of barley. On smaller farms, pig and poultry production is common. So now that we have an idea of where William grew up and his background, let's get back to his life. He had 9 siblings. He was baptized on April 14th, of all days, 1884. At the age of 7, he lived with his parents and siblings, Rose, Charlotte, Ada, and Frederick, at Goosage, St. Michael, and Dorset. I apologize if that's not the correct pronunciation. He left school at 16 and lived and worked on Pentridge Farm with his parents and brother Frederick, working as a footman. In case you haven't heard of the term footman before, it is essentially a male servant who does jobs like opening doors, serving food, attending to the carriage, etc. Usually does so in a special uniform and often works in aristocratic homes. I know I've seen footmen in a lot of movies and TV shows and never really knew the official title. 10 years later, the 1911 census shows him working as a domestic footman in Oxfordshire, England, for a man named Joshua Fielder, who, looking at the census, appears to be a very wealthy gentleman. In 1912, William lived at Woodminton Cottages in Bowerchalk, Salisbury, Wiltshire, England. He signed on to work for the RMS Titanic at the age of 28. His position was that of a second-class steward with a monthly salary of £3.15. Titanic was his first and tragically his only ship that he ever worked on. He was to board at 6 a.m. on April 10th, 1912 in Southampton. There are no witnesses or records to William's experience on the ship or his final moments. What we do know is that his body was initially reported as one of the hundreds of lost victims until almost 2 months later, On June 6, 1912, his remains were discovered an incredible 543 miles away from the sinking site. He was discovered by the SS Ottawa, and the ship's log reads, "Picked up the body of a man with life belt, supposed to be assistant steward of Titanic, from papers in pocket. Man was buried." In addition to the log was a letter written by 3rd Officer Thomas Cook of the Ottawa. He writes, quote, "We picked up the body of a man wearing a life belt. We put our boat out and picked him up and searched his clothes and found a wallet bearing the initials WTK and evidently a passenger of the Titanic. It contained a love letter and a business card, quote, apartments in Margate, Kent. The man was buried with ceremony of the Church of England. The body was much decomposed, especially the hands and face. There was no name on the life belt as it had been washed off. We have since ascertained that his name is W.T. Kerley and was an assistant steward on the Titanic. The finding of the body was 543 miles from Titanic's position. Signed, Thomas Cook, 3rd Officer," end quote. Multiple sources have said that he had a love letter on his person, but according to the Royal Museum's Greenwich collection records, he had a leather wallet, a letter believed to be written by his sister Charlotte, not a love letter, a business card for furnished apartments in Margate, which is a seaside town in Kent, England, a newspaper announcement dated April 4th on behalf of a Mr. Shannon and family, thanking everyone for their sympathy, a ticket titled Kinneton Working Men's Conservative Club, dated March 25th, 1912, and a miniature photo with its original covering. It doesn't, however, specify if the photo is of him or of someone else. A memorial service was held for him at the Baptist Chapel, and shortly afterward, the parish paper was reporting that his body had been recovered. In the Salisbury Journal, published July 20th, 1912, it states that a sum of £60 was paid into court under the Workmen's Compensation Act in William's name. His father Charles applied for the payment of £1 per month, and in the event of Charles' death, that the money should then go to his wife until the money ran out, and the judge luckily granted the application. Decades later, the Salisbury Journal wrote an article about William again in 2022 called Remembering Titanic Victim Tom Kerley of Bowerchalk. The author states that a man named Mr. Will Case knew the Kerley family, as well as a Mrs. Hardiman, who said in 1957, "The young man Tommy Kerley, as he was called, had 2 brothers and 4 or 5 sisters. The family left Bowerchalk soon after the disaster." Mr. Case reported that William was a steward and that his father worked on farms. A Mr. H.E. Trowbridge says he saw him leave the village to go to work on the seas. Mr. Trowbridge reports that when he was playing in a garden as a child, quote, "Tom came in to say goodbye to his parents. As he left, he actually joked about going to the bottom. How prophetic he was being, but no notice was taken at the time. He was only joking. He was, I am told, a cheery fellow," end quote. I really wish we knew more about Tom. He had a lot of siblings, and my hope is that they had children and were able to pass down stories of him. Maybe there are people out there today who know a little bit about him or his personal history because of this generational knowledge. William Thomas Kerley was only 28 years old. I wonder what drew him to the Titanic. Going from a domestic footman in a wealthy house to a second-class steward certainly seemed like a natural step, but I would love to know why he decided to leave the Fielder household and start working on a ship. Did White Star Line offer better pay? Was he seeking adventure? Did he want to see the world? I wonder if he was planning to save money and was in the process of finding a new place to live. You know, he had a business card on his body for furnished apartments in Kent. There are many, many questions, and unfortunately, they will probably go unanswered indefinitely. Tom was young, not yet married. Who knows what kind of future he could have had if it hadn't been for that tragic night. Leaving school at 16 and working his way up out of his father's farm, I think it's safe to say that Tom was a hard worker and he had a lot of potential. We should remember his life and not just the way that he died. Let's pause and have a moment of silence for William Thomas Kerley. Let us honor him and the hundreds of lives that were lost with him. Thank you, crew, for joining me in today's episode. As we disembark, I wish you happiness, love, and peace. Take care, and I'll see you next time on the Voices of Titanic.